Should we be paying federal income taxes if we do not want our tax money to be going towards bombing children in other countries or a secret police that's terrorizing our communities? I think if you have watched my videos before, you would assume the easy answer is no. We should not be giving the government any money to be able to go and commit these acts of terror. But the actual answer is a lot more complicated than that because the way that taxes and spending work for the federal government is way more different than a lot of us think it is. Because as it turns out, our tax money doesn't fund anything. Saying that our taxpayer dollars are buying bombs that are being dropped on children is effectively true because it's our taxes that allow the entire economy to continue to function. However, it is not like we are paying into some sort of bank account that has a set number, and then the government has to pull from that bank account every time they want to buy something. The government's funds don't work like your funds or a business's funds because the government makes the money. They're the referee, not a player. And just like the ref in any sort of sport doesn't actually give a team a point out of their point stash when a team scores, they just conjure the point to tally that a team has scored. The federal government just conjures whatever money they need for whatever they want to buy. However, they can't do that infinitely because that would mean consistently pumping money into the economy. And that might sound nice at first, but that's how you get inflation. If there's a ton of dollars going around, the value of any $1 starts to go down. And so, in order to keep the value of the dollar semi consistent, they tax us every year. But again, they're not taking that money and putting it somewhere to be used later. They take that money and the money disappears. It is effectively destroyed. Now, that might conjure the image of them literally taking like printed dollar bills and ripping them up, but that's not what's happening because most dollars aren't even physical paper anymore. Most dollars are just digits in a bank account. They are literally just a line of code that can be changed at will, which means the government doesn't need to store it anywhere. They just need to hit delete and the dollar is gone. That's what happens to all of your taxes. So when you pay your taxes, you are literally just throwing away the money, which does eventually need to happen in order for the government to continue to buy new fancy bombs. But they can go ahead and buy the new fancy bombs before taxing. In fact, they have to buy the bombs before they can tax you because buying the bombs is what creates the dollar in the first place that then disseminates throughout the economy and eventually ends up in your pocket, and then you have to pay your taxes and then the dollar disappears. But because that dollar disappears, they are now free to turn around and create another dollar to buy another bomb. That's why, even though it is not accurate to say that your tax dollars are specifically buying bombs, it is still in principle the case. Because without the taxes, they can't keep buying bombs. So, why is any of this important when it comes to whether or not we should pay our taxes? Well, if you are planning on not paying your taxes because you don't want the government to be able to buy as many bombs, you have to understand that that is not what you are preventing them from doing, at least not in the short term. Because again, the government can create as many dollars as it wants to buy as many bombs as it wants. It can and it will do that infinitely, regardless of whether or not you are paying your taxes. It's regardless of if anyone pays their taxes. They could have absolutely zero taxes and they can continue to create however many dollars they need to make bombs. So, not paying taxes doesn't threaten their bomb buying ability. It threatens the currency itself. It threatens our entire economic system, which could be valuable. It is a legitimate threat to say, hey, either stop bombing children and stop terrorizing our communities, or we will turn around and we will crash the entire fucking economy. But understand, you have to be ready to actually follow through on that threat. You have to be ready and willing to essentially enter into a mutual aid or barter economy. You have to be ready for the idea that any amount of monetary savings that you have stored in the American dollar is going to be devalued. And you also have to understand that even if you were to transfer all of your savings that are in the US dollar over to a different currency, that there will be people who have not done that, and their savings, their money, their ability to function in this economy will also be hurt. That is, unless you are ready and willing to be able to engage them in that mutual aid and to engage them in that barter economy with everyone else, which again could be worth it. It could be the right thing to do. Just understand that unless your goal is to completely eradicate the economic system of the United States, not paying your taxes doesn't do anything. It could be a nice symbolic gesture, but it doesn't prevent the bombs from being bought. Not unless you are willing to bring everything fucking crashing down, which I am not saying don't do. I'm saying understand what you are doing and why you are doing it. Because if it's done intentionally, it could be very effective. If it's done accidentally, you fucked a lot of things up for no reason. But here's the good news: the government does rely on something that each and every one of us provides to it that aren't our taxes. They rely on our labor. They rely on the real economy of goods and services continuing to function in order to be able to maintain their weapons systems. And unlike when you withhold your taxes, if you withhold your labor, they immediately can no longer use those weapons systems. And I'm not just talking about people who work in the obvious military industrial complex. The military supply chains are so complicated and so vast that disruptions anywhere along the supply chain can have far reaching effects that affects their ability to run and maintain their military. Nearly every single part of our economy is wrapped up in almost every other single part of our economy, which means that if we all start withholding labor, we will see impacts much faster than withholding taxes. But again, if you have a plan to not pay your federal taxes, more power to you. Just make sure that you understand the impact that you are going for and make sure that it is in line with your goals.